The last 12 to 16 months have been challenging for a lot of human beings.
Oh yeah, find a narrow niche and go deep on that.
Don't buy a home just to accomplish a lifestyle.
Cost is the biggest factor of success.
Work with people who have your best interest in mind rather than their own.
A majority of the people don't necessarily want to know what we know.
Even though this is going to cost me that much more, it's going to benefit me that much more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Brady Haye Mortgage Team Podcast, episode 6 today. Pleased to be joined with Logan Queck today. Logan, how are you, man?
I'm doing very good, man. Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Absolutely. Well, just to kind of start off the podcast, kind of set the tone for the listeners and really just kind of give an intro to you. I'm sure you've seen and kind of get a vibe for what we're trying to accomplish here. But just to kind of recap for everybody is the goal behind the podcast is to build quality relationships with quality people, grow together. It's really kind of the heart behind it. So first off, thanks for joining. Always have everybody start off by just kind of giving an introduction. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do what you do? And anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks again for having me. My name's Logan. I'm a financial planner. I have a small wealth management firm here. Been in the industry for about 10 years. Okay. I got a daughter. She's getting ready to turn 8. Okay. We spend about as much time as we can outside and riding bikes during the summer.
Love
and
it.
Coach wrestling during the winter.
Okay.
And all those things keep me pretty busy.
Yeah, totally. No, that's great. This is one of my favorite parts about what I get to do with this is like getting to interact with new people, hear what your story is, how you got where you're at, and just excited to kind of dive into the heart behind why you do what you do, right? Like that's the cool part about my job is obviously, yes, I'm a mortgage lender, right? But I care more about the people that I'm interacting with, how they got to where they're at, their story, and helping them achieve their goals. Right. So let's start with, so financial planning. At what point did you know and decide like, all right, this is kind of the career for me. This is where I'm meant to be, kind of what my passion is?
Yeah, so I started just like everyone else does. There's basically 2 paths. You go to a career fair in college and there's either a big insurance company that you go work with for a little bit, or maybe you start working with a company selling mutual funds or something. That's kind of where everyone starts. And so big box insurance company, pretty standard. You make a list of 100 people that you know and you go beat them up trying to sell them life insurance, or that's what we were doing. And then once you've exhausted that list, you kind of, maybe we picked up the phone book and we were cold calling for long-term care. Okay. I was like 22 years old, didn't even know what long-term care was. So
right.
Initially, it was a terrible experience, and so then I kind of came from a blue collar family, blue collar farming community, small town Iowa. So that was kind of my first like white collar in office experience. It didn't go well, so I for 2 or 3 years was bounced around like construction. I worked at a sprint car shop, port and polishing cylinder heads, assembling cylinder heads for sprint cars, and then kind of like just randomly through some relationships wound up back in the insurance business. Okay. So I worked for a small insurance brokerage here in town, and we assisted agents who were working with retirees with like income planning. Okay. But it was very similar. It's like a lot, this is how a lot of sales works, and I'm not, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but how a lot of sales works is that you have this one product and you go find as many people as you can to sell it to. Well, if you're in the mortgage business, that makes sense. It's like, hey, Brady's, really good at this. If you need a mortgage, come talk to Brady. Yeah. But like the challenge inside the financial planning industry is when you see the title financial advisor, you don't really even know what that means. Somebody that just graduated college and passed the insurance exam could call themselves a financial advisor when they don't really have like any experience or any knowledge or anything. So the financial planning space, or the financial advisor space, is the only space where you can have a self-proclaimed title like that. Okay. You want to be in the mortgage industry, you gotta pass some tests. You want to be a doctor, you gotta pass some tests. You want to be an attorney, all these different things. I figured out that a lot of people there's a lot of balls being dropped because there's people just selling products. So early on, I set out to create an environment where we can, working with retirees, because that's kind of where I started, is create an environment to help them with every single area of the transition from working life to retirement. So retirees have to think about a lot of different things. They think about Social Security. They think about Medicare. They probably have some old life insurance policies from, an agent when they had kids that they haven't looked at in in 20 years. And so there's so many different things. And so the problem is there wasn't really any firms out there that can help them look at every single thing. And so what you end up with, and this is still the case, whether you're a retiree, you and I, think about your personal situation. You have somebody that, maybe a CPA or an accountant that helps you with taxes. You got your home and auto agent. You might have an investment person. You might have an attorney that does something else, but those professionals rarely, if ever, communicate with each other.
Sure.
So that leaves you to try to figure out, well, hey, is this something my CPA needs to come in on? Does my attorney also need to know this? And so what we've built at Total Wealth is that family office style, complete, wealth management, financial planning firm where we can run point on all those different relationships for you. And so we can, if you've outgrown somebody that you have, or you just started a business maybe and you need a CPA, we can recommend one, and kind of talk that strategy with them. So I guess, long story short, I just realized right away that, there's not a lot of people that are helping with the total picture. So a lot of balls get dropped.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, so what I'm understanding is all right, instead of having to go to this guy to do this guy to do this guy to do this, you've kind of got that all in-house, kind of all encompassing, opportunity to serve people's needs. Right.
Yes.
And that's really a cool way to approach that, rather than, just being focused on, like you said in the beginning, selling one or two products here and there. You've kind of got that whole picture where you can really offer multitude of services.
Right. And it's not necessarily all in-house. We don't have a CPA in-house. We don't have an attorney, but I am familiar enough with all those things that we can put you down the right path, or say, hey, we need to bring an attorney in on this. We need to bring a CPA on this.
So you got to quarterback that scenario accordingly. And I think that's kind of a similar approach to the way we like to handle our side of things too, right? If we get a guy that comes in and maybe their credit score is not where it's meant to be to get them qualified for a home loan, we've got contacts to improve credit, right? Or if we come in and they don't have an insurance agent, we've got contacts to get them insurance, real estate agent, financial advisor if they've got an abundance of funds, or maybe they've got an inheritance coming in, or whatever the one-off scenario is that's going to lead people down that. We try to be that quarterback of their profile and be that, and I think that the name of your company is spot on with what you want to accomplish there, right? Is you want to help them attain that total wealth profile,
right?
And lead them to the long-term life success.
Yeah, so exactly.
That's a really cool approach.
Yeah. So I read a book about a guy who has this approach, because conventional wisdom is to find a narrow niche and go deep on that, because it's not super easy to do a lot of things for a lot of people.
Right.
But I was coming back from Kansas City, staying with one of my good buddies from high school one time, and I was listening to a podcast by Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon, and he said something that really resonated with me. And it was about, raising children. And it was hey, if you want a really good environment for your children to grow up in, that doesn't necessarily mean inside the walls of your house. That's the community you live in, the schools, everybody. And so my focus has shifted to yes, it would be better for business if we focused on one type of people. People that have a lot of money, and profitability. But my goal and our goal is to help as many people as we can to elevate the level in the entire community.
And everybody's level goal is different, right? You may run into somebody who has X goal of dollars and cents that they want in their bank account. You may have somebody that has an entirely different goal, right? And you have to kind of customize that profile to fit whatever their specific needs are.
Exactly.
And you're not going to discriminate one versus the other on which route you go, but it's just a matter of like you said, helping as many people as you possibly can and being genuine with that approach.
Right.
And that's, again, aligns so well with the way we want to do things. And, it's a more organic, natural way to approach the business and not feel that cold caller approach like you talked about, right? And I'll be honest, obviously both of our industries for that matter, there's a lot of people that do what we do, right? From a title standpoint. And how I differentiate myself and how I'm getting the vibe that you do as well is that genuine approach where you're not just going to call somebody that you don't have a relationship with, you don't know, and be like, hey, let me be your guy, right? That's not probably going to be the approach you're going to take.
Right.
And tell me if it is, obviously. But
might be now.
Yeah, correct. But I'll be honest, I have gotten calls from people that are in your shoes, not necessarily with your company, obviously, but with other companies that, take that approach. It's hey, so-and-so told me to call you, right? And it's like, really, that's funny because I haven't talked to that so-and-so that you're mentioning in 6 to 10, 15 years, you know? And so that's where I appreciate your approach is like, listen, if you can be a genuine relationship, be a genuine human being, have their interest at heart and give them the genuine advice that they need, I mean, it's almost a no-brainer to work with you then at that point, right? So I love that approach. Talk a little bit about your client relationship approach and how you go about your business growth, your business development, because obviously it's not like, you know, people are just walking into your office and saying, hey, I've got all this money, I want to invest it, or hey, I need this policy or whatever it is. Talk to me about your approach and how your business development works. So
mostly it comes from an education standpoint. And so I've coached wrestling for like 10 years and have always just been like wanted to like help people learn how to do different things. And then if, you know, so what we do is we teach classes around the city on different topics like tax planning. It's mostly focused towards retirees because like in this industry, that's who that's kind of like how, you know, who we're supposed to target just because, you know, partly we can predict when the need is. A lot of people retire when they turn 65. So, you know, that type of demographic information is readily available online. So, of course, that's easier. They have more assets, so they're wealthier, or they're more profitable from a business standpoint. But so, that's just kind of like in the industry. That's how I started, is everybody was working with retirees. And so we teach classes on Social Security, tax planning, income planning, and touch on different estate plannings. We got to be careful if any attorneys are listening. This is not tax advice.
We're a very compliant podcast here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an education first strategy. We want to be like, hey, here's the different things that you need to think about. And so that's how we start. My goal too is, like I said, I don't just want to work with the retirees because there's a ton of firms out there who are good firms that can work with the retirees. There's not a lot of good firms for, you know, like younger professionals, or those, you know, you have the people like you said, hey, you know, my buddy told me to call you. No, he didn't. You know, you just saw my name on LinkedIn or something. And so there's not a lot of good financial planning firms that are trying to help younger people like us just because you don't have as much assets and it's not as profitable. And so that's kind of like the education component is more like this, you know, you and me chatting. So somebody's bored at lunch and they can check a reel and it's like, oh, you know, Brady and Logan were talking about something that, you know, I need help with. And so all starts with education. The next step, and this is kind of really unique, is that we're not a fit for everybody. You know, we are really good at helping kind of like 4 groups of people, like young families, people that are getting close to or in retirement, business owners. And I've been through a divorce, and so I'm really familiar with the situation. So I love talking to people about that. And that's like something in the future I want to coach people through. But we start with, you know, education component, and then a quick 30-minute call that says, hey, here's what we do. Here's what we believe in. Like, what do you believe in? What are you trying to do? And if those things line up, then we move forward and create a financial plan. If they don't, then we'll point you in the right direction to somebody that can help you. But, you know, something that's really unique about our firm too is that I own the firm completely. We don't have any corporate like overlords that kind of tell us how we have to work. So, you know, we're able to, you know, get compensated in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is, you know, if you have an advisor that you love or in a relationship that you love and you don't want to make the change, we'll do a flat fee financial plan for you that you can take with you to your advisor to implement, or implement it yourself, or whatever. So it's cool because, like, I'm sure you've been in the situation before where you sit down with somebody, they show you some product and they just call you every other day and tell them to beat it. Or you make a purchase where we don't have to do that because it's like, hey, we're getting compensated a little bit for the plan. You're getting a ton of value. We can part ways as friends after that point, and we both feel good about it. But if you need some more help, we can help.
Cool.
That's like the biggest difference between us and a lot of other firms.
And I do think that's unique, right? Like, there's not a lot of people that are doing that. And it's kind of a win-win, right? Like, in a perfect world, obviously, by all means, you'd love to be their one-stop shop where you get their full trust. But if you can still have a way where you can benefit as obviously as a firm, but also still pouring into these people and adding value and not burning bridges or, you know, burning other relationships they already have, it can be a win-win because you may know something that somebody else doesn't, and hopefully, you know, in a perfect world, the people they're currently trusting are already great experts too. So, no, I really like that. Okay, so you mentioned, I want to kind of go back to those classes you talked about. two questions, twofold. Is one is how often do you have them? And two, format wise, are you doing them all in person? And then also talk to me about like your marketing side of that. So, because obviously there's one thing to host the class and have the knowledge, right? Like obviously no different with my world. Like I feel like I have a ton of mortgage knowledge, but it's more getting the people in the seats that's probably the hardest part of that. Talk to me about your marketing strategy and how do you get people to attend those as well?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Getting people in the seats, or like getting people to watch this message that we're sharing today is the toughest part. Right. Because what I found too is that a majority of the people don't necessarily want to know what we know. Mm-hmm. They want to know that we have really solid advice, that we're trustworthy, and that we are going to do what we say we're going to do,
and we'll take care of it for them.
Right. And that's like. So, these classes, it is an education standpoint, because we don't like set a point. We don't talk to people about products there. We don't like give advice about this and that.
Yeah.
We'll answer like brief questions, but most of these people, it's a class, but it's more like a first interview, because these people, like, they want to have the information about Social Security. They might learn one or two things they haven't thought about, but like, it's more so like, hey, can they teach me about, is there anything I haven't thought about? Because maybe they've been to a couple of them, but it's more so like, hey, like I need someone to help me. And is this person somebody that's
the right fit from a communication and a relationship standpoint?
Exactly.
So I think that's a lot of times from a financial world, whether it's in your space, my space, insurance, real estate, regardless of the industry that you're speaking about, I think a lot of it comes down to the comfort level from the communication standpoint, right? Is there may be people that are far more versed and creative from a mortgage space than what I am, but they may be somebody you're not comfortable calling and having a genuine conversation about your scenario and your industry or your specifics, of your credit profile. It all comes down to that comfort level of willingness to have that conversation more than it is the knowledge side of things, right? And so no different than that is like when you get these people to show up at your class, again, you want to identify the comfort level of that relationship.
Right.
And that's where, you want to work with people you trust and that you feel comfortable being open with.
Right.
So I love that. That's awesome. Share some insights from the financial industry, just the state of the union now versus what we've seen the last couple of years, kind of your expectations moving forward. What have you been seeing out there? What's a couple of tips that you recommend from a state of the union space? Yeah.
First tip is don't make decisions based off of what's happening right now or next month or even like year end. Always keep in mind that financial planning is more of an art than a science. We don't know like how long your life's going to be, or if you're going to get married and have children, or if tragedy is going to strike and somebody's going to pass away early. So we're just trying to use our best guess to like help you achieve all these goals and help mitigate risk as much as possible. And so I would say the biggest thing is like, don't watch the news. Don't listen to people. There was people early last year calling for a recession all year long, and we ended up with a great year.
Yeah.
So biggest key is have a plan and stick to it. It's more about like consistency and saving and spending and regular investing than it is exactly what you invest in.
Right. Or panic decisions, right? Like don't make panic decisions.
Exactly. And that's
especially when things get tough, right? Like I'll be transparent, and I think that this probably goes for a lot of people in America right now, is the last 12 to 16 months have been challenging for a lot of human beings, right? From a financial standpoint, the inflation, just life in general is expensive, is just the reality of, I think, what a lot of people have realized. And so it's really easy amidst that challenging time to make a rash decision and sell your assets or whatever the one-off may be, just to feel comfortable with that bank account information or that bank account number that you're looking at. But it's important not to make that panic decision and work with a professional who knows, like, hey, no, you need to stick to your guns. Like, you're going to be okay. And maybe just adjusting other things is important too.
Yeah, exactly. And so Vanguard did a study where they tried to quantify or put like a number to the value of like working with an advisor. Because, some advisors charge commissions. We charge sometimes either a flat fee or a percentage of the account. And so it's like, well, how do you know how to put a value on that? So Vanguard did a study. If you go Google like advisor alpha or value of an advisor, they found that having a good relationship with a comprehensive financial planner can add, 3 to 3.5% a year net returns to your portfolio.
Yeah.
And 1.5% of that is from behavior coaching.
Right.
Making sure that, your savings rate is good, or making sure that you're not panic selling, or making sure that you're taking enough risk or not too much risk that you're going to want to capitulate or sell your position when shit hits the fan. And so, and this isn't new news, like people hire coaches for all types of things. It's like Tom Brady's an amazing athlete, he's got a coach outside of his head coach, for his entire life. And so it's like one of the most important things I think for people to recognize, like, hey, I can't be good at everything.
Yeah.
And I can't even be really good at what I'm doing if I'm worrying about everything else. And so having somebody in your corner that does not have an emotional attachment to your money or whatever else is going on in your life, saying, Brady, I know what you're feeling like. We had the same conversation 6 months ago. I'm here for you. It's going to be fine. Like, that is part of the value of having a relationship. That's
so good. I love that. And honestly, I feel like you're speaking to me too. It's like sometimes I need that reminder, So no, that's great. And I think that, having somebody you can just have that reassurance of too, to know like, hey, no, we talked about this 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 12 years ago. Everybody's different on how long they've worked with you, but having that plan is so important. I love that. Selfishly, I want to talk about, and I'm more curious to hear what your process is, but selfishly, being in the mortgage space, I want to hear your perspective of how the mortgage relates to a financial plan, how real estate relates to a financial plan. Talk to me about, and maybe talk to my listeners and my clients, because obviously I'm going to blast this out to my clients, my database too. Talk about your opinion on real estate, homeownership, how that relates to your plan and how you advise your clients accordingly.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. I think this is probably one of my most unpopular opinions when I talk to people about this. My girlfriend, if she watches this, she would confirm.
When she watches this,
yes,
right?
Yes, when she watches this. I sometimes don't soften statements that I make to people. Okay. And so without some context, it can seem abrasive. But one of those things is homeownership. So I personally don't think it's helpful when people talk about their primary residence in terms of an investment. Okay. I think that a home is certainly a better asset to purchase than a car, where homes appreciate and cars don't. So if we're talking about, hey, what assets, like any asset that you buy that's going to depreciate, you want to like spend the least amount of money possible for like the main features that you need. I think like cars, clothes, just whatever. Mm-hmm. But homes, I think it's more just a lifestyle choice. Yeah. And so what I like to look at it is like, we have certain frameworks for like a debt to income ratio. We want to make sure like, okay, here's what your team says that you can spend on a house. Here's what your cash flow looks like. Here's what your savings goals are. Here's, what your 6-month emergency account is. And if all that stuff is dialed in, then we kind of have some framework. Well, hey, like, let's make sure that we can comfortably service this debt no matter what. And that's kind of what we look at it. But we don't, it's on the balance sheet, but, I just don't like, I think like the biggest issue, I think houses are great. Obviously, like I rent a home right now, and right now I guess it's an environment thing too. Like when interest rates are high, if you have a mortgage on a $400,000 house at 3%, that looks a lot better than renting a $400,000 house for $3,000 a month. Right. If you have a mortgage on a $400,000 house at 7.5%, and you add the taxes, insurance, and 1% for annual maintenance on it, maybe, then the rental could be better. And so it's like environmental. So I just don't like looking at a family home in terms of an investment, because I think it's like, I'd say the only time you could look at it as an investment is like at the end of your life. It's a nice asset. It's going to be paid for. You're going to downsize. You might have some extra cash, or you can use that equity to purchase something else. So I think it's more just a lifestyle choice. Houses are awesome because you get really connected with the people in the neighborhood. You can customize it to really like complement your life. I don't know if you had siblings, but you'd make a ton of memories. And, there's like so many good things about home ownership. And so I don't want to steer people away from that. I just don't, if we're talking about investments, I just think the primary residence is a different conversation than like everything else.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm glad you said that, because I do think that that's probably a more unpopular opinion, especially from a mortgage lender and a real estate agent perspective, right? Because obviously it's easy for us to advise people to buy homes because that's how we're benefited, right? But it all comes back to that goals-oriented selling that I actually talked about in the last episode. Is like, it all derives from what your goals are for the next short term and long term.
Right.
And if owning a home is something that you want to be a part of, that by all means, then let's chat through what does that look like. We dive into, my process has always been when I talk to somebody for the first time or receive somebody who's interested in buying a home, rather than just me sending them the application and saying, yeah, get pre-approved, let's go, move forward with this, let's get your offer written. I really like to do what's called a buyer's consultation. And through that is very similar to what you're chatting about is I'm identifying what your goal is with this home purchase, and identifying not only, okay, what do you qualify for, but more importantly, why are you wanting to accomplish what you are setting out for? Why are you wanting to buy this home? And I think that aligns really well with what you said there, is like, you have to identify what your purpose behind what you're trying to accomplish is, and putting that plan in place and helping us guide accordingly. And rather than me just telling you, hey, yeah, your max approval is this,
right,
I'm going to ask you, what's your comfort level? What's your comfort level from a monthly payment standpoint? Because I got to make sure that I'm not just telling you, hey, yeah, you're good up to this price point because that's what you qualify for. If you're not comfortable with that, or frankly, you don't have, like, it doesn't align with your financial goals from a savings standpoint or other debt payoff standpoint, like, it doesn't do me any good to even have that conversation. So I love that approach. I think that's great. And I think that that's a super big value add for people is to dial in those goals, figure out what your short and long-term goals are, and work with a professional that can help you guide through that.
Yeah. And I think like one of the really important parts about making like just understanding that your primary residence, like not considering an investment, is that once you because if someone tells you that your primary home's an investment, you're like, well, I want to invest more,
right? So I want a bigger one.
Yeah. Well, if it's an investment, like I want to invest,
buy the biggest one I can find.
Exactly. Yeah. And so once you realize that we don't look at it in investment terms, then you might look at it just like a car purchase. It's like, hey, how do I spend the least amount of money possible on this home for my family or this car? That way I can allocate my other resources to saving for vacation or education or retiring early or, just being able to increase my lifestyle. Because we've all, let's say, saw some golf clubs that you wanted to buy for $3,000 and you bought them and they didn't change your game. And you're like, well, shit, I could have got by with ones that are $1,500. Like we've all, buy a new car or whatever, the newness wears off. And so like, I think like, frugality wise, like it just makes sense to spend the least amount of money possible. So once you shift your thinking to like, hey, this isn't necessarily an investment, it's a lifestyle choice. I can spend this much, but like, everything has an opposite reaction. So like if you spend it there, then that takes away from resources here and could jeopardize other goals.
That's so good. Yeah. So I think just to kind of summarize that again for the listeners and just to make sure that this point really is driven home is like, don't buy a home just to accomplish a lifestyle.
Right.
Budget accordingly, figure out what that budget is from a monthly payment standpoint, and then what is the least amount of money you can spend in order to achieve the same lifestyle that you want to achieve. Right. So that's so good. I love that. All right. I know one point that you really had made sure that I knew prior to going into this that you wanted to kind of chat through about was the conflict of interest piece with your career, what you do. Chat about that, kind of take the floor on whatever you'd like to cover on that side of things.
So, one of the biggest issues in the finance industry, like I mentioned before, is like titles. There's like, I'm a certified financial planner. It doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything, but it's like I have a minimum level of understanding, just like, the bar or when you become a CPA or a doctor, like there's some that are better than others, but at least there's like a minimum level of understanding. You could be 18 years old and pass the insurance exam, and now you call yourself a financial advisor, and so that's a big issue. The other issue, and this isn't just in the financial planning space, is just conflicts of interest. And once you start thinking about this, then you start to understand where some advice that you get comes from. And so there's anytime money changes hands, there's a conflict of interest. When you're selling a house, you're trying to sell it for as much as you can. When you're buying, you're trying to buy it for the least amount possible. If you're working with somebody that, sells houses for a living, and they get paid based on the price of the house, they want to sell more dollars of houses. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good or bad. It's just that there's something there that could influence some people. Sure. So in the financial planning space, or I have a good example. So I had a younger client, and she's like, "Hey, Logan," she was just a friend. So I guess she wasn't a client at this point. She's a friend. She's like, "Logan, I'm having this problem. My lender keeps telling me that I need to go buy real estate or refi and just do different stuff with mortgages and invest that way. And my investment person tells me that I don't want to get real estate, just to invest all my money in the market." And I'm like, well, that's how they get paid. It's that's the downside of working with an investment professional, similar to somebody like me that gets paid based on how much money that you have invested. Because, if you have $200,000 in an investment account and that advisor is, getting 1% a year on that, say that's $2,000 a year, and you take $100,000 out to go, put a down payment on a rental property or something, we just cut their income in half.
Right.
And again, not everybody's like that, but it's just, you got to keep that in mind when you're taking advice, what conflicts of interest are here. So sure. One of the big places that there's conflicts is in the investment space. There's basically two types of ways that you can be a professional like me and offer investment advice or facilitate transactions. And you can either be registered as a broker or an investment advisor. So you can go to brokercheck.gov and search anybody's name, like me or anybody else, and it tells you if they're registered as a broker or an investment advisor. Brokers typically sell mutual funds and get paid a commission for it. So let's say, there can be charges on it up to 5.75%. So, if you invest in $100,000, they're getting a $57.50 off the top. And then, the rest of it goes into this mutual fund. Okay. So there could be a conflict of interest there to buy and sell things, when you don't necessarily need to, because that's how they get paid, to buy and sell things. Sure. Whereas somebody that charges a percentage of your account, they want your account to get bigger, because when it gets bigger, they get paid more. Right. Sure. But they may take excessive risk to get that account bigger, or they may not let you know about some investments outside of there because it's going to cut that. Sure. So those are the two conflicts of interest. There's conflicts of interest based on the way you get paid. If you only have a license to sell insurance, I know what you're going to talk to somebody about when you say, you're going to try to sell them insurance, because that's how you get paid. Right. So that's the thing that we educate people on the most is I talked to somebody and they said that I needed this whole life insurance plan. I'm like, well, they work for a company that sells whole life insurance almost exclusively. Of course they're going to tell you that. Right. So, and I'm not here to, it's good people caught in a bad situation, because you get out of college, you're like, shit, I got all this student loan debt. I need to start paying for it. Yeah. These insurance companies are real good about showing you paychecks from their highest producer and be like, okay, I want some of that. Yep. And then you're like, hey, I'm going to do this. Plus, life insurance is a critical tool in the financial plan. We all know somebody who's passed away prematurely and had some dependents left behind who maybe have been financially wrecked from not having that protection in place. So it's super important. But the problem is that when that's the only tool in your bag, or if that's the only thing that you're licensed to talk to people about, somebody may sit down with a financial advisor and say, well, hey, they said all I needed was life insurance. I don't need to consider anything else. Right. Well, you don't have a will or any legal docs in place, in case there's so many other things. The conflict of interest piece, it's in any type of industry, but I think in the financial industry, because of the fact that people can, self-proclaim their own titles, it's really confusing about the type of advice or the help you're going to get when you sit down and talk with somebody, based on those titles, if you don't know what type of research to do.
Super good. So if anybody listening to this today is planning on or currently has a financial planner that they're working with or sitting down with or wants to sit down with, what would be 2 main questions you would encourage them to ask when they're sitting down with that person? To that point that we just discussed.
Right.
Just to make sure, because like my main goal with this whole thing is to make sure that they're getting the transparency they deserve.
Right.
Right. And I think that's what the heart behind what you're saying too is, like, there's a lot of options for people out there. Certain people may advise accordingly based on their benefit rather than the clients. So I wondered if there was a way that we could have people ask the questions they need to in order to identify that they're getting the best things out of their advisor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this is the thing that stinks, is it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
Ray Dalio, I don't know if you ever heard of him, a big hedge fund guy. He wrote a book called Principles that was like fantastic. There's just like so many like golden nuggets to take from that book about relationships and cultures inside business. But like one of the things that he talked about the most is that it's not, it's really important to get opinions from all different types of people, but you need to have a little bit of skepticism towards like what everyone says. And like one of the things that he does is like when he's listening to someone, like, hey, is this believable?
Sure.
And so that's like one way to evaluate it. But like a couple, I can give like 3 things that I would do. So first, decide, do you want to work? And this is the conversation that we have with somebody. Like, there's like 3 levels of service. That we have the single purpose, that like, if someone needs a mortgage, they know that like Brady's the guy. Like, you don't even need to talk to anybody else. Brady's an awesome dude. He's really good looking. He, can get you the best rates. Like, that's no brainer.
Sure.
But like people know you do mortgages. So there's nothing like, they think they're coming for a mortgage and they're going to get a lifetime warranty on their car or something,
Right.
So, but then the second step is, there might be, for like a home and auto agent, for example, they do a really good job. Like, hey, I got this home, got this car, give me some good rates, some good insurance. Boom, got it. Mm-hmm. They might also say, hey, we got some life insurance. I don't know if you ever considered it. And so, there's like multi-purpose. And then like at a level above that is kind of where we serve, is like we got with the tailor fit approach. Like, hey, like I don't have anything in mind. I don't know who you are, Brady, but I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go through this process that we have to see if what you have right now is good, if there's any way that we can improve it. And based on what you tell me your goals are, if we need to course correct it all. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like where we sit. And so, the people in that space are usually CFPs.
Okay. And
the reason is because that is like the most standard coursework that kind of takes you through the whole complete financial planning picture. Okay. It takes about 12 to 18 months to 2 years to get through. So it's similar to like a master's degree in like financial planning. It's just broad, like covers all topics. And so, I'll admit, like it's hard to imagine, I just, was able to provide so much value for people after I went through that course, because there were just so many things I was exposed to that I didn't even know. You don't know what you don't know. And so I would make sure I would work with a CFP if you want that tailor fit. If you don't, if you're like a do-it-yourselfer that just says, hey, I need a mortgage, I need some home and auto insurance, then, it's pretty easy to find those professionals that just specialize in one thing. The other thing is, fiduciary, that word gets thrown around a lot in the, in the financial advisor space, but people can be licensed. I was talking about brokers and investment advisors before. Mm-hmm. A brokerage license in some situations right now doesn't necessarily require you to act in someone's best interest as a fiduciary. And the license I have is an investment advisor license. So being a CFP and an investment advisor requires me to act in someone's best interest above my own all the time. But some people have both licenses. Mm-hmm. And it depends on what type of products they're selling you, whether they are required to act in your best interest or not. So Brady sitting here in front of me, if I was licensed as a broker and an investment advisor, it would be impossible for you to know which hat I was wearing, the fiduciary hat or the non-fiduciary hat. So I would say, quick things, figure out what you want. If you want somebody like tailor fit, comprehensive wealth management, identify that, and then go out to the marketplace and say, hey, do you do estate planning? Do you do financial planning? Go to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are the contents in a complete financial plan? Boom, boom, boom. Take this to the advisor. Which one of these can you not help me with?
Right.
Start there. And then, are you a CFP? And then next question is, go to brokercheck.gov, type in somebody's name, and if they're registered as a broker and an investment advisor, then you got to ask them some more questions about like, well, which hat are you wearing? And so it's complicated, but that's where I would start.
It is good. Yeah, no, I think that's, if there's one thing out of this that I want my people to take away is know the questions to ask.
Right.
Obviously trust somebody who you can trust, and work with people who have your best interest in mind rather than their own.
Right.
I think that's so good. And I think that it relates a lot to the approach that I'm taking right now. I think in my world, the kind of the nature of the real estate world, specifically in the mortgage space right now, for the last, I'm going to call it 16 months. I don't know the exact timeline right now, but obviously we've been in a higher rate environment, right?
Yep.
And it would be really easy for me, over the last 6 weeks, we've seen some rate improvement. It'd be really easy for me to start calling all of my past clients and saying, hey, we need to refinance your loan right now,
right,
because rates are lower than where you're at right now.
Right.
The approach that I'm taking is significantly different, because I still think it's going to get better than where we're at right now. And I don't want to pull that trigger too early.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean it's too early to have that conversation, right? And figure out and determine, all right, what is your goal and when will it make sense to refinance that loan? I'm not just going to assume that a quarter of a point is going to be enough to do it now, and then we're going to do it again and then again and again, just because frankly that would make me the most money. It's not going to be my approach. I'm always going to have their goal in mind and determine, all right, when will this make the most sense? Now, I'm also going to advise too, like, hey, if I see any changing indications of like, we need to act now if we want to save you money, but I'm not going to just cold call all my clients right now and say, hey, no, rates are 0.5% lower than where they were when we closed your loan. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. It really is subjective. And I'm taking that approach of like, let's have the conversation now. If it makes sense and you want to move forward, by all means, we can do that. But I'm not just going to cold call and say, all right, let's do it. Because frankly, the reality is that most people just aren't educated enough to make that decision on their own. They really rely on me to decide like, hey, is this a good time or not? Because people just want me to tell them like, all right. And it's easy if I were to call them and say, hey, I can save you $200 a month, it'd be pretty easy for somebody to make that decision. Just like, yeah, let's do it. The reality is there's costs associated with the refi too. And like, we have to find that break even point of that overall savings versus the costs. And again, a lot of people aren't educated enough to make that decision on their own. And so that's where we come into play, is like with the guidance and the recommendations we're going to make, we have to work together to achieve that. So I love that stuff we're talking about. And I think that's so good. Any closing thoughts, anything else you want to cover, anything, whether it's in your space or in my space, any other conversations you want to leave people with, or any other content that you think you'd like to get out there before I kind of wrap up with the closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, from a personal finance perspective, as far as I can tell, everybody wants to talk about returns and stuff. I typically don't even talk about that, because it's more of like, and this is like a whole nother conversation, but it seems like, as far as I can tell, all the data that I consumed, that most of the time cost is the biggest factor of success when it comes to performance on investments. And the reason that it's challenging to figure out what costs are associated with a 401k or investments is because a lot of people don't want you to see that information.
Yeah.
And so kind of like you were talking about earlier, it's like, yeah, we could save you $200 a month, but these extra costs are going to be piled into your mortgage,
right?
Long term, that's not favorable, or it might not be, it may or may not be. It could be, but we just got to evaluate it and keep that in mind.
Well, it also depends, like from a house standpoint, it depends on how long they're going to be there too.
Yeah, exactly. So. And so from our standpoint too, I mean, I don't think it wasn't until 2012 where 401k providers were required to put fees inside like language, but it's still impossible to find it. Like, I don't even know where to find it sometimes. We got to call in. And so what happens is these fees are just like netted, or like in the gains, in the gains and losses each year. So, when it's more about keeping costs low. But it's like I guess the biggest piece of advice that I could give is just find somebody that is going to create a comprehensive financial plan for you. And then build some processes to like automatically, make contributions or save or make progress towards your goals. Because the automation point of it, is where once you can simplify that and automate savings and look at that stuff, and have somebody in your corner to behaviorally check in. I guess that's one big point too that we didn't talk about yet. Like, one really interesting thing about our firm is, amongst all the other things that I already told you, is that we have a really good process for after the initial plan is built. There is a lot of good firms out there that can do an initial plan.
Right.
But what we do is we each month we review one part of everybody's plan. And so like January, we just sent out some books to some of our clients. And I don't know if you ever heard, but it's called The One Word by John Gordon, where it's kind of like, you think of a word that's like your theme for the year. And the idea behind it is one word's easier to, keep track of than like 10 goals.
Sure.
And so January, we're doing like some goal setting, and we encourage like all of our clients to do that and like get behind them and push them through that.
Yeah.
And then we cover, we've basically taken the entire financial planning process and broke it into 10 pieces. And only 10 because January's goal setting and December's gratitude.
Sure.
But so each month we send out an email and a survey to our clients, and for the estate planning portion, for example, or hey, have you bought any assets? Any divorces, deaths, marriages? Did you move? Because we want to make sure that if they did move, that they get that new house titled in the trust. And so there's just so many different things, and like most people are really good on the initial front end, but don't have a process for the back end. So balls get dropped all the time. So we have a really good process. And so, so I guess, I'm getting kind of windy here, but my advice would be like, figure out if you want somebody, a comprehensive financial planner, or you want to do it yourself. Focus on keeping costs low, but cost isn't the only factor. You get what you pay for. Yeah. Some things that are better cost more, and just like everything else, it's consistency. Your business, my business, life, consistency.
Totally. I think that's a point that we talk about a lot too. Is like it may not always be the cheapest route that's the best for you,
right?
And it's evaluating like, all right, even though this is going to cost me that much more, it's going to benefit me that much more. And it's going to have the people in my corner that I can trust, and they're going to follow up and have the process in place and communicate well and all those other factors and benefits that come with it. I think an analogy that I hear a lot and we use a lot in our industry is like, all right, when you're going grocery shopping, where do you shop for groceries most often?
I usually go to Haye.
Okay, so talk to me about why you either go to Haye or Target or one of those places.
Yeah.
Why don't you go to Walmart, or why don't you go to the gas station to get what you need on a daily basis when you shop for groceries?
Yeah,
right?
well, when I first bought a house in West Des Moines, Haye was the closest, and it's cheaper than the gas station.
So its location is really it's the convenience, it's the availability, that kind of side of things.
Right.
But is it pretty? My point, I guess, behind the analogy is like it'd probably be cheaper if you went to Walmart, right?
Yeah,
versus Haye. That cost would be more beneficial if you'd go to these other stores, right? But it may not always be the cheapest. It's the best. You get the helpful smiles. You know exactly where you're at. You're comfortable with the location. It's clean. It's that pristine service that Hy-Vee provides and Target provides that is better, and you don't have to navigate the unknown of the worlds of the other grocery stores and the other places. So working with somebody, even if it means costing a little bit more, working with somebody you can trust, who's clean and advertised and well spoken and has a follow-up process and provides that value is far more important than maybe just the ease of it being the literal cheapest option you can find.
Right.
So,
exactly.
No, I think that's a great tip. No, I think we've covered a lot of awesome stuff here today. I think that we've got a lot of great content. I think that the important pieces that we want to drive home is work with somebody who you can trust and has your best interest in mind. Always stays that at the forefront of everything. And at the end of the day, build quality relationships with quality people that have your best interest in mind and grow together. Right.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's awesome. Logan, give the people just reminder and insight who you are, what the name of your company is, where can they find you, how can they reach you, socials, emails, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I believe all my socials are just my first and last name, Logan Queck. Okay. And you find me on the gram, the book, or you go to our website, totalwealthdsm.com. It's kind of funny. Like, I think one of the hardest parts about naming a business is finding the right URL.
Yeah.
And some joker out there, already owns totalwealth.com, and they wanted like $40K for it. So I had to throw a DSM after it. But if you go to totalwealthdsm.com, you can learn more about our, the types of, we can help anybody, but we're really passionate about helping people, that have been in similar life stages than me, and the business owners, the young families, and the retirees, just because that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. But kind of our process is laid out on the website. You can schedule initial consultation. Like I said, it's just 30-minute phone call. Hey, here's what, you tell me what you need. We'll tell you what we do. If those line up, we'll put a plan together. If they don't, we'll point you in the right direction.
Navigate you accordingly. I love it. Well, Logan, I appreciate you joining me today. The last thing that I always leave everybody with on the podcast, I don't know, are you prepared for this question? Have you watched some of the episodes?
Yes.
You know what's coming?
Yep.
Favorite wing spot?
Favorite wing spot, I gotta say, I don't eat near as many wings as I used to, but the High Life Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
I'd say that, but I always get Buffalo.
Yeah, that's my stuff too.
It. But High Life Lounge.
All right.
If you have any wings down at High Life, I'd say, I haven't had them in the last 4 or 5 months, but they're probably the best.
Well, there you go. That's another one that's new to my list, so I'll have to add that one to my list as well. But Logan, again, thank you for joining me here today and being a part of episode 6. Appreciate you pouring into the people, adding value to myself, my listeners. I learned a lot, and I'm thankful for you, and looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Thanks,
Glad I could
everybody.
help.